All right, welcome to Small Towns Unscripted, Dave Rogge.
Well, thank you for having me, Russ.
I appreciate it. This is Nicole Turner. I'm Russ
It's
McClellan.
nice to meet you.
Thanks for tuning in one more time, guys. Hey, so Dave, we've known each other a while.
Long time.
Long time.
Been
How
in
long
the valley
is
for a
long?
long time.
Yes. So remind me, when did you move to Chelan?
Well, I moved to Chelan back in the winter of 79-80 because I had been hired by the company that owned the nursing home here in town, Regency Manor, at the time, and they were having some challenges and needed to make a change, and I ended up, I was involved on a variety of levels in our industry and got to know the owners of the Regency Care Centers is what it was called at the time. And they hired me to come here and see if I could, kind of straighten some things out. And by that time I had been in the industry in an administrator capacity about 5 years. So, I had some experience in dealing with various things that can happen. And so they hired me for the position, but before they hired me, they wanted to make sure that I came and took a look around because of the structure of my family at that time was such that my son was adopted, and he and his sister both, and she's a couple of years older, but he was a mixed race, and so his father was African American, his mother was Caucasian, and they were in the military, and at that time the military frowned on people marrying within the military, and neither one of them really wanted to be married to one another, and so they gave the baby up for adoption, and they went their separate ways. And so Nancy, my wife at the time, she and I had been trying to adopt a second child because his sister was also adopted. We couldn't have children ourselves for a variety of reasons, but they wanted to be sure that the community was prepared to have a little black boy move into the neighborhood because he obviously is very, very much African American in his presence, and so.
Interesting.
And even though the Hispanic families were here and the orchards and this and that, they weren't sure how the community might handle a black child.
And who's they again?
Well, just anybody. Just
Anybody.
the people within the community,
Yeah.
whether or not they would consider that to be kind of out of bounds, because at that point there was no one here in the community
Really?
that had that kind of background. So they weren't too sure, and the staff here kind of alerted them that you might want to think about that, and you might want to have them come and hang out and just see how people responded. And people just fell in love with him.
Yeah.
And so it was a great relationship, and after we took the position. And
It's interesting how times have changed and how people have grown in a lot of ways. We've talked about that in the past, how multicultural and the aspects of the community have diversified quite a bit, and that's great. It's amazing. Now, I want to get into your adopted children, because there's a lot of, you and I have talked offline about the stories, and it's pretty just amazing, and it's cool. And I want you to highlight it because there's a lot of people in that position, right, that are looking to do that right now, or maybe have just gone through it or trying to get through the process.
Right.
But let's go back a little bit. Tell me about your childhood, or your parents or grandparents. Where'd your family originate?
Well, I was actually born in Kansas, and that's where the nucleus, if you will, of my family ended up settling. They came here from Germany, and my grandfather was a mason. And he and his brother, and as it turned out, one of his sons, were in the business over time. But my father joined the military. As soon as he was old enough to join the military, he joined the military, and he immediately went to Korea, and was involved in the Korean conflict on board ship and stuff like that. But the emphasis on us as a family was that when you're in the military, you're always the new kid on the block.
Right, you're moving around.
Every 3-4 years, 5 years sometimes, you get new orders, and up and away you go. And so that was the challenges of growing up, throughout my life, was just trying to always get to know people and always trying to make friends and fit in, and it usually went pretty well. There was always trials and challenges, but my father, of course, being in the military, was extremely strict, so we had certain guidelines that we lived by, and we just made sure that we watched our P's and Q's, as they say, and so that was pretty much it. We went the longest we were ever at a place was when we lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and he was stationed out in a military base called Millington, which was about 20 miles outside of Memphis. And we just so happened we got there at a time when there was a neighborhood that was kind of being developed that was more military people than that weren't on the base or whatever. So we had the opportunity to be around a lot of military people at that point. But that was most of my kind of mid-adolescent years. That's where I, kind of started to really develop who I was.
Yeah, did you find that was a forced learning curve to be able to be open? Because you're a pretty open guy and really good communicator. Do you think that helped you more than it hurt you?
I think so, because people could see that I was friendly, that I didn't mind talking. That's probably one of my, and everybody would say that's my greatest strength, is I can't shut my mouth. So,
we'll have to get you a real estate license.
And, so it's, that was where I really started to develop who I was and became less concerned about who my friends were, but just getting along with everybody, because I knew it wasn't going to be long before I moved on. So very seldom did you ever get to have one really good friend or two really good friends, because you knew that you were going to be leaving them behind. And that was really hard. And in fact, my first girlfriend, I can remember even to this day, her parents, not too many years ago, came out to see my mom, who's passed now, but they actually still lived in the house. And this is, like 60 years later, or not 60 years, probably about 40 years later, they're still in the same house.
Oh, wow.
And their daughter was I was sweet on her. So that was kind of the first real heartbreak that I went through as a teenager, but also the first time I ever got a job. And I started playing Little League football at that time, and that's when I got involved in that sport and started to develop. And I was always a little bigger than most of the kids, taller, a little. My father, because of the way he raised us and because of the things that we had to do in chores, we were cutting wood. We were doing things all the time, that we were building that body and the core. And so the strength and the speed and quickness of life became a little simpler, and so had the opportunity to have some success doing that.
Did you ended up playing sports then in school?
I did. I ended up playing. My father retired up here. This is where he wanted to go, so we ended up in LaConner.
Okay. And
I ended up finishing my high school and played football in LaConner. Ultimately went to Everett JC and then on to Central Washington and played. Was fortunate enough to have some financial help to do that. So.
Nice. Okay, that's fun. Those were good times. That was back in the Dean Nicholson basketball days.
Yep. Dean was there, and in fact, at one point, my younger brother, Kevin, he was quite a basketball player. He was 6'4", 6'5", and he could jump out of the gym. That's what everybody said, And Dean was real interested in having him come play there, but there was an issue with dollars available to play and that kind of stuff. And my father being in the military, it was either we work and do it on our own or we didn't get to do it,
Sure.
So that was my key to education, and the others didn't really have that same opportunity. They had to go out and take out the loans and had to do what they had to do to make it work. And that's where I first met Nancy. my ex-wife, and she and I were together for 15 years, and a good portion of it was right here in this town, and this was home, and I know she still thinks of it that way, even though right now she's not working in the area, but I believe plans to come back when she retires, because this has just become our home. I mean, I've been here over 40 years, and even though I've left the area for a year here or a few months there, I was here every weekend for the kids, and eventually I bought a house over on San Remo, so we had a place that we could go to and be together, and so that's kind of the makeup of getting here until I reached that point where I said, we're moving the business, this is where we're going to be, and set up offices here, and ultimately built my little company from here.
Yeah, so when you were on because you were doing that for 5 years or so for the retirement communities in other cities. Were you working for a big company before you ended up buying Regency?
Well, it wasn't a big company. The company, actually, Regency was much bigger than the group that I was working for in Seattle. They had 5 or 6 facilities in the Seattle area, and so this was coming to work for Jim Clay was the name of the owner, and ultimately became my business partner. Okay. And he had a number of facilities all over, and so he was on the road all the time, but he worked in a way that allowed you to run the business like it was your business. And they had people out there to support you if they needed, but for the most part, they just let you go and say, okay, this is your business, make it work. Here's what our budgets are, this is what we want to see, make it work. And that was my opportunity to learn enough that I felt comfortable stepping into a position of my own ownership.
Nice.
And that all began with Jim and that company.
It's a blessing to run into people that are willing to be your mentors, that aren't micromanaging and trust you enough to kind of let the reins go a little bit, because that's hard to do in business, where you often get at scale, you find yourself sometimes the larger you get, the more you try to hang on to, and it becomes difficult, and it's not easy to find people that are also reciprocating that loyalty.
That is so true.
Yeah.
I can remember one manager that I didn't hire, or I should say I let go. He was an administrator in training, and he sat me down and said, you have to realize that nobody's going to care about this business the way you do. So you're demanding too much of us for us to take charge of all of this when we don't know what we're doing. And I thought, well, now, time out here. That's not what I hired you for, not what you displayed when I hired you. And it wasn't long before we went our separate ways. But it was a blessing for me that I had that opportunity in many ways, because Jim and I became literally, my father passed some years before, and Jim just kind of not only became a mentor, but he became a best friend and almost like a dad.
That's great.
And he trusted me, and I thank him for that. And we went through some ups and downs together, but we were always right there, hand in hand, and doing what we needed to do. So that's what gave me the opportunity to really grow, as I said, and at one point even to become the leadership of our industry. I was the president of the nursing home industry for 5 years, and one of those as the past president on the executive board, blah, blah, all of that stuff. But again, brought me to a point where I felt like I could lead people and lead a company and lead fellow members of that industry. And so that just reinforced my strength and learning, so that I felt comfortable to grow as the company started to grow a little bit, and to step out and take chances. So
Yeah, and you ended up managing different cities too, like Okanagan. You had one in Okanagan, if I remember.
Had one in Okanagan. But when I retired, it was we had 17.
17.
And they were in Oregon and Washington. We had Okanagan and this one here. Then we had most everything else was on the I-5 corridor, except we then ultimately went to Prineville, Oregon, Redmond, Oregon, and that other little town, and I always forget the name of it. It's terrible. But there were 3 communities right there together around the Three Sisters Mountains, if you're familiar with that. And they were communities. Those were more than just a nursing facility standalone. They had retirement, nursing home, assisted living, all on the same campus. So this was kind of a new challenge for me and for our company when we took on these larger opportunities, but they were at the time struggling, and we were able to come in and turn some of that around and help it stabilize and start to move forward in a positive direction. So
yeah, it seems like an industry, just going through my limited experience with my mom and dad and assisted living and with dementia, and that was a little wrinkle in that whole. Dementia is a completely different animal than just retirement facilities, because the mind's not quite there, but it doesn't happen overnight.
No.
So
right.
you're trying to find the right place, and it seems like, I guess not unlike real estate, I tell my team, like, what's your goal? And if they give me a number goal, I go, why don't we translate that to how many people we can help? Because if you help X families, that will translate, the money will come.
Sure.
But if your focus is on money and not the people, then you generally are going to struggle, because you're not going to be as passionate. That compassion and empathy for in the real estate game, it's one of the biggest financial decisions people will make, and they don't do it every day usually. I would imagine it's the same for all the people in these communities when they're some of this stuff's pretty emotional. Whether there's an illness or an accident, or just people age up, right? Would you agree with that? That it's based?
Absolutely, and it's unfortunate that as we age and grow older, you don't know what you're going to be doing, when you're 75, 80, whatever, or even younger, and you don't know how you're going to respond. You don't know how you're going to be, and when those changes come, and people who have grown up around you, they take it very personal. That now, oh my gosh, there's Dave Rogge, and he's in a facility, he can't think for himself, whatever. Those friends, those people, it's very emotional for them as well. And it makes it hard for them to go, and for people to come sometimes and visit you. My mother had ALS, and she passed away with that. It's been 10 years now. It's just hard to believe, but most of the time when you have something like that, it starts with your extremities. In her case, it started with her mind and with her ability to talk. And my mother was, if you think I'm a talker, my mother could talk circles around me. But she had all the friends in the world because she was so open and just loved to talk to people. But over time, as she could do less and her writing became unlegible, to respond to questions and that type of thing, people started moving away from her and they felt bad for her, and it hurt to see their friend that way, but they couldn't bring themselves to overcome that, to realize what was happening to her in terms of, as she lost friends, she became less and less willing to exist. And so it came down to, in her case, literally we had one year where we had a Christmas where all my other brothers and I were able to get together, and we had it at her home. Her folks, Michelle, my current wife, her parents brought their Christmas tree up from Myrtle Creek, Oregon, and set it up on her porch so she could see a Christmas tree. And literally 2 days after everybody left and we got packed up and went home, I was literally pulling into the driveway, and my wife, because she went a few days ahead of me, she said, "You need to turn around and go back. Your mom's in coma. She's not going to last very long." So ended up having to go back. But all of that just to say that she reached that point and gave up because there was nobody else but us. And even we, shame on us, didn't take as much time as we needed to take. I mean, my brother lived there in Mount Vernon, so he saw her a lot, and his wife, and we got over every chance we got. But we were raising a family and the kids going to school and running a business and stuff. So things got a little bit hairy, but we really those kinds of things we don't stop and think about, because that's what's going on inside that person, and ultimately then something happens like that.
Yeah, it was amazing to me when I was really fortunate to work with my dad every day and stay here. I was the opposite, K through 12, and then I managed to, have a family here and have stayed here ever since. So I've been 36 years now in real estate. I'm not sure how that happened. But when my mom and dad both got ill with dementia, and they ultimately passed away in my home with hospice care, just that reflection of gratitude that I had so much time, where totally understandable that most people don't get that. And I didn't always see that. In fact, I remember when he was 82, he had a stroke, and I was like, wait a minute, he's 82. I thought he was like 52. He was such a hard worker and we worked every day. I was like, he outworked everybody that I knew at 82, right? So it was kind of a shock, is my point. For me, even though I spent every day with him almost, doing all kinds of craziness, but we were always together, and I just never really understood that he got old.
Yep.
And then that shock led me to trying to translate all of this, navigate all of this assisted living. And then with dementia, I learned a lot about insurance companies. I learned a lot about the point system, where after the stroke, the doctors would say, whatever they put in their little report. We spent about a month in Harborview, and I was basically living there as he was coming out of a coma from his brain bleed. And then I had to learn a lot about advocacy for patients.
Yeah.
And I watched a lot of people not have that.
Yep.
And I was like, wow. And then the point system basically led to either occupational therapy and some of that kind of work, or convalescent.
Right.
And the insurance companies kind of dictated it at the time. So
Yep.
it was an interesting. Now, fortunately, it came back to me for 4 more years, and then I was a little more prepared, because I saw it coming after that. But boy, it could be a shock, and I bet you had to deal with a lot of family members like that.
I dealt with both kinds. I dealt with, or actually there's more than that, but I've dealt with the family who didn't want anything to do, literally. At one facility that we had a family that would come in every Christmas, put a package with her name on it. The mother was at the nursing home. They would put a package on the nurse's station with her name on it and leave. And that's the contact, but they couldn't stand seeing what was happening to their mom. It was just not something they could manage. And then there's the other side of that where they advocate to the point of, I hate to say being disruptive, but when you have you have to have a flow when you're dealing with people that are sick. You have care plans, you have things you have to follow, and families that are to the extreme don't understand that. And so they're wanting to push on more, when the government says, wait a minute, care plan says this is how much we're going to pay you, this is what you have to do. You can't do more than that unless you want to just eat it, if you will, for the, lose the money.
Yeah.
Or, and that sounds bad when you think about it, but at the same time, there's a reality that you got to pay labor, you got to pay taxes, you got to do everything every business is doing. And then there are those who become very selfish, And I had one lady who, when I can remember early on in my career, who came to my office, and I had just sent out letters, and our private rates were going from $25 a day to $27, $28 a day. And she came in and she was just hot.
Oh, man.
And really gave it to me. And her response to me was, I need to find a place for my mother, because she's got this piece of property down in Camano Island along the water, and that's mine, and nobody's taking it away from me, and I don't care. She's not going to sell it, to be cared for. Just very selfish, and not even stopping to think about, gee, look at her mom did whatever she had to give her this beautiful place to play as she was growing up, and for her family to enjoy on holidays and different things like that. And instead, it was, that's mine, and I'm not letting anybody touch it.
It's funny how people act about money sometimes.
It is terrible.
They just kind of.
Yeah.
I bet you had to counsel like your staff, and you had to have some latitude, and you had to have some skill sets. I'm sure it was repetitive, but different a lot. Like you said, it could be any extreme, and
Right.
you have to be prepared with your staff.
Right.
That can't be easy.
No, because the staff wants to react too. Staff, they want to. They care about these people. It takes a incredible human being to be able to take care of somebody that's in a nursing facility every day and do it with a smile.
Yeah.
An incredible human being. And I have the greatest respect for any and all of them. And it's like they want to step up and say something. They want to be able to spout off, if you will, about mother's getting what she's getting and good care and so on. And these are the things that we do every day to take care of that. And, they can't.
Yeah, it's hard not
So
to be
you have to
defensive,
be-
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're
Right.
proud of what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we have to have those, when we would have staff meetings, we would talk about things like that. And when we had our group corporate meetings, which were a couple of times a year, we would have in-servicing on how to interact and how to get our staff, how to prepare our staff to interact with families if that was a need. And it did make a difference for them, I think. I think it helped them.
Well, I'm sure, yeah. I mean, just my limited experience, hospice was amazing, by and large. But even then, there was one person, I thought my wife was going to put somebody else in the hospital because this girl, my dad was like not doing well, or maybe it was my mom was not doing well, and in bed, and it was kind of in the last days, and this person that was supposed to be there while we were working was sitting on the couch, and she's like, she came home, she's like, what are you doing? She's like, well, it's not my job to watch your mom die. I thought Audie was going to just throw her through the window. That girl got fired. I mean, she was done. Not just by us, but I think hospice.
No, sure.
Boop. And so, everybody has people that you don't know how they're going to react to. You
Right.
get them in the game.
That's right.
But to hospice's credit, everybody else with both my parents was amazing.
Right.
I mean, in fact, more than amazing. It was like one person in particular was so beautiful. She'd sit there and rub my mom and back and brush her hair, and they became like besties. And it was so, to your point, it's so beautiful and so selfless of them to just become. And then it must be incredibly hard for them emotionally because of the way they bonded, knowing that this is the end of life
Right.
pattern.
Right.
Yeah.
It's.
Right.
I just was like, you guys are unbelievable.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it was just really cool to watch those kind of people work. So I bet you saw a lot of that.
Yeah, you almost expect to see wings come out the back
I know.
of their shirts. When you turn your back and turn around again, you almost expect to see that wings fly because they're such angels, and they really are.
I agree.
And it just is not something that everybody can do, and it's just not something that people can do with a smile.
Yeah, and then pack up and then move to another one and start over.
Right.
Like you
Yeah.
just
Right.
lost a friend, and then you
Right,
lose another
right,
friend.
Right, absolutely.
You're right. They are truly
Yeah,
angels,
yeah,
and it was a gift, from a blessing from my parents, both of them. So,
Yeah.
it seems like that industry. Do you believe that is evolved for the? I'm sure you keep tabs on it, kind of now in retirement. Do you think it's evolved in a good way or not so good way?
Well, I think it's evolved in a good way in the sense that there are. I'm sorry, I talk with my hands sometimes.
No, me too.
But there are different kinds of environments now. Used to be everybody went to the nursing home.
Okay.
Whether they needed to be in a nursing home or assisted living and a retirement, but maybe the family couldn't take care of them at home anymore,
Right.
or they couldn't be in their own apartment because they were forgetful or whatever, so they would put them in the nursing home. So there was a really high level, and then there was that person who was literally on the ends of life. But there were also a lot of people who were confused, had dementias, and they became, for some of the residents who were still alert and still what have you, they became an irritant. I hate to say that, but they wandering in the rooms,
And
going
dangerous.
through their things and what have you, and people get frustrated about that. Now they have the proper kind of units for those people, for people who need that kind of care. And so it makes it so much easier to care for them properly,
Right.
and still give the people who need nursing home care the right kind of care.
Mm-hmm.
Now the challenge is that some facilities have taken on residents that the care really is too heavy for what they have to staff. And assisted living, everybody's out there kind of, it's kind of like scrambling for their share of the residents out there that need of some kind of a thing. But there's adult family homes now. There's dementia care.
Yeah.
There's respite care programs. There's skilled nursing home, assisted living home. There's a retirement. There's retirement communities that you can buy into. There's so many different things that are out there. So what happens is everybody's grabbing for their share. So some businesses are really struggling, and in a small community like Chelan, even it started to struggle in terms of being financially viable, because people were starting. The doctors were discharging. They were going to follow their patient, their resident. So they discharged to Wenatchee, or they discharged to wherever they were closest, so that they could go and follow them, rather than discharge them to Chelan and then have to drive up here to see them once a month, which was required, by the government in order for the payments and those kinds of things to be made. And so that in itself became very challenging, almost, kind of created a battlefield almost.
That makes sense.
And people, and trying to be supportive of your fellow man and your fellow facility and caregiver, some days was very difficult, especially when you were worrying about how am I going to cover this payroll so that Susie and Billy can make sure their kids get to eat this week. And it could be very difficult and very hard to manage in that respect.
Yeah, what I experienced is the transition with dementia. It's kind of rapid at times, and it's not predictably rapid. So we found that what the goal was originally to keep my mom and dad together after the stroke, and then soon after that, Mom had, we started seeing some signs. So we were like, okay, but they're still living together, trying to keep them together. So we tried assisted living, but by then my mom had sundowning syndromes, and she was sweet as pie, but I don't know if you know what sundowning syndrome is. Well, Dave probably explained it better, but basically they just find themselves in the middle of the night thinking it's the middle of the day, and they'll just start walking. And they live often, at least my experience was, they lived more in the past than the present. So like my mom would just start walking out of the facility, and to your point, it wasn't a memory care unit. So there's no security.
Right.
It's voluntary. And she would just, 2 a.m, in a robe, just start heading out the door. And I remember one time when it was getting towards the end where we knew this was, turned out to not be the right place because of memory care is a different deal, right?
Yeah.
And my mom would go to one end of the building, and they go, Patty, where are you going? She goes, oh, just going for a walk. Well, you can't, middle of the night, okay. Oh, that's right. And then we just by, and then she turned around and walked to the other door at the other end of the building.
Right.
And it doesn't really register, right? So
right.
that kind of stuff. And then to your point, my dad would just kind of like walk indoors, he'd just start going into different, hey, what's going on, middle of the night. And their mind is just not, my dad's the most honorable guy I ever met. So it's not like he would never have done that. So we knew that at some point we had to split them up. And so my sister, she's an angel too. So she took one of my parents, and I took the other, and it was hard to do. I mean, after being married since 1956, the good news, I guess, for us that I found with dementia, at least they didn't, even like at my dad's funeral, she was like, where's Donnie? I'm giving us, you're giving the speech about my dad. So there's a good side of dementia that you don't really get too worried about today. And then finally, to be able to be in our home, I moved Kelly in with us, so we were all there towards the end, and we were very lucky to do that because and COVID was kind of my dad died in 2020, my mom in 2021. It was kind of a blessing because we were all working from home.
Right.
So in a way, by the time it got to that point, I was glad. So and I just sit there spending so much time listening to my mom tell stories about the past. So we just act like it was the past.
Yeah, I learned so much when it was getting closer for my mom as her ALS progressed. I took at least twice a month. I would go over and spend the weekend with her, and give the hospice nurses would take a break, and I would give the injector, her giving her medicine, and do the things I needed to do to keep her comfortable and help make sure she was clean and dry and happy. And I learned so much about my history and the history of my family because that was what was so familiar to her. And, as Russ points out, sundowners, not all, part of what sundowners is as the sun starts to set, what do you think about? You think about family and dinner, or family and getting together for television, or sit down and watch, or whatever. That's also part of it. They begin to start looking for those family members who should be home, who should be part of what's going on. And so part of the wandering and part of the questioning all the time was, and history. I mean, they could pull a moment in history out just like that. But if you asked them, what were you doing a second ago or a minute ago, they wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah.
And so, but that was one of the things, was looking for the sons, looking for a hubby, why he's not there ready to sit down and have dinner, and I got to hurry up and get dinner ready before he gets in from the field if he's a orchardist or whatever. And so that was another kind of trigger if you were looking to see what was going on with someone, was knowing that they were asking about that. And then if you ask about history or ask questions about your past, man, they could just talk to you for hours. And that's what one of the educational things you learned when you started going to these educational things about as we learned more and more about people and dementia, was talk to them about their past. Talk to them about it doesn't hurt to play the role. Gee, you remember when we used to go walking down the old wooden sidewalk there down by Campbell's, arm and arm. It doesn't hurt to do that because that's what they remember, and that's what brings some excitement to them.
And peace too. What I found, it's easy to be reactionary and go, I just told you that. That I see people doing that after I had to learn and get some education on it too, because I didn't know anything about dementia before it happened to us, and then it was like, it's not their fault. But a lot of people get frustrated because they're trying to live in the moment, and the people aren't. But when you do what Dave said, and you start talking about what was it like to be on the 1956 as a princess in the Apple Blossom Festival?
It was there it goes. On we go.
This flower and this. I mean, it was like, this is crazy how much you can remember. Just pulled it right out of there, right? So, well, that's interesting. I mean, you've helped, countless people. That's got to feel good in retirement.
It's, and it's not just the residents themselves. There are individuals, employees. I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody come up to me and say, Mr. Rogge, thank you for treating me the way you did. When I was working for you as a CNA, it convinced me I wanted to be a nurse, and here I am a nurse. And so it's something that not just touches you and the resident, but can also affect the person that you're working with and helping them in terms of making a decision about the direction that they want to go with their career and that kind of thing. And that's, to me, very rewarding. Probably one of the most exciting things that ever happened to me is as an owner, as a manager, in terms of how I treated my people, because I often told everyone they were my best natural resource. And I needed to make sure that I fostered and watered that resource. So always looking for ways to give them something a little more, because you could only pay what the government's allowances were. So how do you enhance some of that? So we had little things that we did. But down in Oregon, I was one of the, believe it or not, I was one of the bigger long-term care employers down in Oregon at one point. And the union decided that they wanted to come in, and I'm not anti-union, this is not an anti-union thing, but my employees felt so good about what I was doing for them that they went to Medford, or to the union office in Medford, and picketed the office and told them to go away and leave them alone. That their employer took good care of them. Crazy. He was kind. He, in all of these things, and literally picketed against things like that in order to keep them away from our business, in order to allow us to continue to do what we could do for them. Because they realized, we were very open when budgets were done, when things happened. We were very open about talking about them, so that they understood exactly, how things were working, and that the best way for us to be successful would be to get out and tell people, talk to legislative people, go out and talk to people in the community about if you have a need, or if you know anyone has a need, to come and use our services. And that way we didn't have, it wasn't as big a monumental blow when your census was down a little bit, because you knew it was going to come right back. And that worked out, fairly well. But that was something that I'm very proud of, because it's not often that you find a group of people who are willing to go stand in front of a union hall and say, go away, we don't need you.
That's wild.
And that was something that was very special. So,
well, if everybody treated their employees like you did, there probably wouldn't be a union.
That's very possible.
So it's good that they stood up for you. And that's a great feeling when people do have that reciprocating loyalty that you deserved.
Was there challenges with working with the government and insurance companies and all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, I can only imagine from a little bit of experience I know of.
I can get
from the corporate level. I'm sure you witnessed a lot.
I could get on a soapbox and go for hours about that. But let me just say that the government does not feel that it is their responsibility to take care of the elderly. And therefore, there are many other programs, because they're the future. These folks are the past. They're the future. But just because they're the past, nobody's willing to look at the fact that their work in the past is what built this country. It isn't the people that are out there today that built this country. But yet they're not willing to provide correctly and adequately to make sure these people get the quality of life that they deserve going out as their days come along. I also know, I can also, Medicare and the private insurance companies getting into the Medicare business and stuff, that those are all things that have had a significant impact in one way or another. But I will say that there are those that are in the industry that when Medicare was doing things differently or whatever, they tried to do the best they could to rip them off. And that's not okay. They said they would pay you this much to take care of them. if you did your job, they would be giving you what you needed because they did it all based on care plans and the numbers, as you say, Russ. But if you, if you didn't want to, if that wasn't satisfactory to you, to find ways to make notes in a record or something like that that would imply somebody needed something they didn't need that the government paid for, then, they didn't question it. And now, of course, once the private insurance got into it, and Medicare started, there were several great large law cases where people ended up, stealing millions,
Ooh.
From the government. And as a result of that, some of them went to jail. And that's, it was only maybe the 1 or 2% of the people, but boom, that gave us all the black eye. And so everything changed, and everything became pretty harsh. And we had this adversarial role against the state coming to visit us and talk to us about where we can improve and to help us get better. And the insurance companies not wanting to pay the bills because they didn't need the services that they got. Well, how could they know? The reality was somebody called once a week and said, can you please read to me the last week's notes, or can you fax me a page of the last week's notes? And maybe that week Mrs. McClellan is having a good week, and she, so everything is fine, and the record reflects that. They don't look at the week before that when things were a mess, but they look at that week and they say, oh, well, gee, obviously she's doing better. We're going to reduce what we're going to pay you for her because she's obviously on the mend. Well, the week before that she was on her deathbed, and the week after that might be the same. But the insurance companies don't get out. They don't inspect what's going on with the residents. They don't look at them. They read it from a chart, and if the chart says something, that's what they base their decision and their payment source on. And you've heard how if you break your hip, it's supposed to only take 7 days in the hospital. That means they're going to pay, if they do a study of the West Coast, and it says that most places, 7 days is what you need to heal a fractured hip. Now, some people heal slower than others and what have you, but if it says 7 days is all they get, that's what they pay. Doesn't matter what it means to Miss what her need is. And that's wrong, because you're again not taking care of the person. They're not recognizing the value of that person, and that they should be able to do things on their own, and you should be able to care for them individually, rather than saying that they are part of how many millions of people, average of how many millions of people along the West Coast.
Yeah, that goes to that advocacy that I learned about at Harborview, where the doctors are so busy. I mean, they're all brilliant, but they're so busy seeing so many patients that what I experienced about advocacy is my dad would, when he started getting up and around after a minute, so he'd walk, and they'd want him to walk. They'd want him to get up and exercise after he came out of a coma. And then he'd be really exhausted. He'd walk for an hour, half hour, whatever, and then he'd be sleeping, and the doctor would come in, go, Don, and he wouldn't respond. So then they'd write in the notes, non-responsive. And so I was like, and I'm there, and if I wasn't there, that non-responsive means it's not worth it to pay for treatment or therapy. Just put them in a home. And I was like, wait a minute. So I got, I had HR called me a couple times, security called me once. So it was like, I was getting some attention, but because I told them I started videotaping everything. So I said, I was kind of a pain.
You is the pain that you were talking about.
Yeah, but I was just logical. I was like, I'm going to put a big screen TV and simulcast his exercises. So when you're too busy to pay attention, you're going to see a giant screen TV from Best Buy in the hallway.
Because he was just awake and he was just walking.
And unfortunately, what I also learned is there's some beautiful people that work there, and the nurses kind of are those angels we spoke about. And this one particular angel said, well, I've been here 38 years, and if I'm going to go tell that doctor exactly what's going on, if this is my last day, I've had a good career. So she stood up as an advocate with some more authority than just a reactionary son who probably, you know, they probably see the people go off the wall too. But all I was trying to do is get what reality was in the chart.
Because you knew the chart mattered.
Yeah, I learned a lot.
Yeah, well, that's the story.
Yeah.
That's the whole story of that person. And if you don't, if you don't take the time to look, you look at it from front to back. If you don't manage that resident, I mean, they're coming out of a hospital, going into a facility, and that's the first connection that that nurse on the other end of the phone has with that person from the insurance company. So it's very easy to say, tell me about this person, and they read off what's there. Okay, so then based on that, they write their report, they recommend to the insurance company, this is how much we should be paying for this person. Then and then, you know, the next week or 2 weeks comes along and they call and they say, read off to me what's in the chart from this date to this date. And, gee, they're just, you know, been having a great couple of weeks, and the sunshine, it's summertime, they're outdoors. Oh, well, gosh, great improvement. We'll reduce what we're paying and probably arrange discharge
Cut 'em
before
loose.
long.
Yeah.
You know, and then all of a sudden they're dead. Excuse my, you know,
that's-
whispering,
it's
but that's,
a
you know,
real issue,
and
right?
it's like, you know, and the insurance company is, you know, fold that one up, move it, pull the next one up on your desk, you know. And they'll probably shoot me or something for saying that, but it's reality.
Yeah, it's reality.
Now,
Yeah.
there are always changes, and I haven't been in the business for a while, so there could be some changes that aren't there, but for listening to many of my friends who are still in the business, a good portion of that's still in place, and people are constantly trying to legislate it and get it changed. And, you know, sometimes you get an inch, you know, this year, and next year maybe you get 3 inches, and then the next year all of a sudden you're back 5 or 6 inches. So it's just, you know.
It's challenging industry. I remember I also didn't, there's really, like in anything, there's really good people, just like the employers. There's really bad employers and really good employers. So I get the challenge of trying to come up with an umbrella system that covers everything. Because like you said, there's abuse and fraud and also the opposite. One of the things I also learned is they were making assumptions about what was available for my dad from a resource perspective, like a bed. You know, so Confluence had X number of beds, and and there's not that many for occupational therapy, physical therapy, all the therapies, which is kind of a transitional place, right? You can't do that forever, but you're hoping after a stroke you got to relearn to walk, you got to relearn to write.
They call those rehab or swing beds in the hospital.
Yeah. Well, I had my dad had a very good friend and an executive at Confluence, and he was very high up in. My dad helped his family a lot growing up. He really loved my dad. And so when they said Confluence wasn't going to do anything for him, I said, really? And I called the head dude. I said, well, this is the head guy, so maybe you could talk to him about what he will or won't do. And he's like, Donnie's got a bed. So I was like, don't make assumptions, you know. It's like, and that's one of the beautiful things about small towns is that I had that relationship. I should say my dad had the relationship that he earned, and then that executive honored it. So I was like, they were like, holy cow, that doesn't happen. But again, it goes back to what, not everybody, you know, I actually called back and told my agents here that were very involved in my stuff. I go, you guys might want to go find another job because I think I'm going to be here a while, and I might just open a nonprofit for advocacy because this is crap. I mean, I'm like, but I was so emotional too, right? I'm in that time where, of course, I was reactionary. I didn't even know he was old, you know. You know, and he was 82 years old, but I just didn't. It's like it's silly to think about now, you know, 5 years later, but you're in that moment, and it's very emotional. You're trying to do everything you think you know how to do that you weren't trained to do, and so you just have to navigate. And then sadly, to your earlier point, Dave, a lot of people that you know, in his roommates and things that were coming, they just didn't have anybody, and or they were homeless or whatever, and they become wards of the state. You know, they just, especially with strokes, because you can't talk and communicate very well. So that became, especially when you don't speak English or different dialects and
Right.
foreigners and different languages. It was like a very incredible education that I spent in that month.
Yeah.
And we just got kind of lucky at the end of the day, but I was like, wow. And then somebody told me, I think it was one of the nurses said, that advocacy for patients is right up there with a lot of other treatments. The ones that have the advocacy and the support of their families do way better health-wise than, like you said earlier, when they just kind of give up.
Yep.
That willpower is a real issue.
Yep.
Yeah, that was fascinating.
Yeah. No, it is very important for you to take on the role when they can't do it themselves, to be an advocate for them, because there are shame on us, but there are people out there that'll just take and rip it off, and that's wrong. I mean, they don't, they see the opportunity to, pad the bottom line a little bit more, and it's just not necessary. I mean, they don't need to do that. That isn't for them. That's for the residents. And to take and try to scrape a little here and scrape a little there before you know that they're well cared for, then that's wrong. It just, I don't know, it just, makes you inside, it just kind of.
That was good and bad in everybody, right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
every industry.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Well, let me shift gears a little bit, because I'm really fascinating about your adopted children. And could you kind of walk through, you said you and your wife couldn't have kids, but when did you decide that adoption was a path you were going to go down? Like, how old were you? And
we were 22, 23 when we adopted Megan, the oldest of the four. And all four of my children are adopted. It just kind of happened that way, that both of my wives had, problems that they couldn't, that they weren't fertile or whatever. And has something called endometriosis, maybe you've heard that. Anyway, after we tried and we went through all the medicines and we went through all the charts and did all the stuff that they told us to do and the little shots and stuff, and nothing was happening, we figured we wanted to be parents, and we figured that, there's a lot of children out there, and, we were particularly wanting to have infants, but it would take a older 2 or 3 year old if that's what we needed. We wanted a child that we would be able to work with and not have them be able to help not carry their baggage that they remember from their earlier days. And so we first got, and we told them that we would take children with special needs. And so we first got a call after we had done all the paperwork. We actually went through the state with Josh and Megan, and that was a little bit easier, a little less expensive, but you took your chances. And we waited, we worked at it, got all the stuff done, the home visit, everything was acknowledged. Yes, you'd be fit parents, and so on and so forth. And then nothing happened. And it was about 2 years later that we got a call, maybe not quite that long, but anyway, we got a call from them saying that there was a baby girl who had been born, but they needed to alert us that she had 3 other siblings, and that there was something that she was a carrier of a chromosome that caused metachromatic leukodystrophy. That's and that it was the end result was that it was death by age 2 years old. So if we were taking this child, we were taking it with a risk. And so we said, well, 2 years is better than no years, and this child needs somebody. Doesn't belong in a foster system somewhere so we agreed to adopt her, and it turned out she was healthy, and she is like blooming in what she does. She's a big shot with with a huge management company, these clouds, you know, the big storage.
Yeah.
Well, she is like one of the big shots that manages setting them up, making sure they get built. She just got back from Brazil not very long ago.
Wow.
And so she's like traveling because, you know, she's doing quite well. And and smart as a whip, you know, just, and but then we decided after we had her for a couple of years, we thought, you know, we'd like to do this again. And we went back to them, we said we would take a, you know, mixed race, whatever. And lo and behold, it wasn't very long after that they contacted us about this little boy. That was, and Josh was, Megan was 7 weeks old, I think, when we got her. And Josh was, I want to say 8 or 9 weeks old. Anyway, you know how when you see something and you go, oh, that's mine. That's, you know, that's kind of like what happened when we went to the DSHS office in Ephrata, because the parents both were native of this area. In the Ephrata of the gal, her family parents had a big farm, and in out of Moses Lake, and anyway, so they kind of were from this area. So they said that they had a little boy, half white, half black, and would we consider it? And we said, well, certainly we would consider it. We'd like to come over and meet him and see if it's a fit and so on. And so we went over to Ephrata, to the DSHS office, and they brought him out, and it was like number one. He had this little T-shirt on it, and it said "number one son" on it, and it was like, you know,
Perfect.
that's my son.
That's so
you know,
cool.
there was no question. At that moment in my heart, I fell in love.
Perfect.
And so did Nancy, and we knew that boy belonged to us, and you know, and so. Then, of course, we moved here when he was 3 years old, 3 or 4. I'm getting old on dates. Anyway, long story. But they were raised here. They grew up. We were away from here 1 year. That they were back on the coast, but we ended up coming right back. And they loved. I mean, this was home, and it still is home. They both live in Wenatchee. And you know, they're happy and doing their thing and what have you. And unfortunately, my wife and I at that time, we ended up in a divorce. And then I remarried several years later and to Michelle. And Michelle is a nurse who actually worked for me, who was going through a divorce. I had just gone through it. And so we just kind of became friends. You know how that, and next thing you know, we're good friends, and going to sporting events. And you know, the year that the kids won the state basketball championship at the 2A tournament, she was with me at that tournament.
Well, Josh was a great athlete.
Yeah, he was on that team, and
he was a great athlete.
So we, anyway, ultimately we ended up moving over here with the company had already been relocated. And so we moved over here and got married. We've been married 4 years now.
Oh,
and but
when Josh was in sports, he excelled in almost everything.
Yeah, he was quite a track athlete.
Yeah,
that was really his. I mean, he did well. You know, he could, when he graduated, he could have gone to Oregon State and played football. He wanted to run track and play football. And WSU wouldn't let him do that. They wanted him to strictly run track. And University of Washington wanted him to strictly run track, primarily because of some of the experiences that they had had with their sprinters and getting hurt. Yeah. And then, you know, ruining their track seasons. And so he had to make a decision, and Eastern, they were kind of fudging, saying, well, maybe not, maybe. So he just finally took the track scholarship at the University of Washington. And he did his freshman year, he went to the Pac, at that time it was Pac-12s. And they finished third, I believe it was, and the team in the 4x400. And but he ran in the open 400. He qualified for that, and then he qualified, just those two races. And then they also won the Drake Relays that year back in, I think it's in Philadelphia, in that area. But they had they had a good season. He did well, and down in Reno, the indoor meets, they did well, and he did pretty well in the 400 there. And so he had a good freshman year, but he'd never been hurt before. I mean, never been hurt. And then
that's hard.
He ended up in his sophomore year, he got shin splints really bad. And instead of doing what he should have done when the trainers told him what to do, he decided he knew better than anybody else because he knew his body, and ended up doing things to try to overcome the problem, and ultimately ended up really kind of his system after that never really caught up again. I mean, he was still pretty damn fast. Yeah. But he's his junior year he went out. I think he won one race his junior year, and then by the end of the season he was pretty well on the shelf again. And but it's tough. It's a tough. It's
tough competitive.
Yeah.
And 19-year-olds kind of do.
Yeah.
We all know. We all think we know. Yeah. At 19 or 20, what I can do to get better, faster.
Right. Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're all guilty of that at some point.
Well, and there was a disadvantage, I think, and that was I think that Josh was going through a little bit of a identity crisis, because here's a African American kid, because if you've ever seen him, he's African American. Russ has seen him, so he knows.
I've known Josh a long time. Yeah.
Anyway,
good dude.
He is strong as an ox, but anyway, he got to Seattle. Most of the guys on the track team were African American. For the first time ever, he came home one semester during a break, and he told me, he says, "I'm one of the brothers." I said, "What?" I said, "You don't have any brothers?" He says, "No, I'm a brother." Mm-hmm. And I'm going, "Okay, talk to me." Mm. Well, that's what they call us over there in the city. There's us black guys. We're brothers. Well, here's a kid who's now all of a sudden been kind of told, you're mulatto, you're mixed race. Everybody knew that's kind of was his structure, because everybody loved him, so everybody knew about him in town here. And I think he got kind of caught up a little bit in some of the identity issues, and it took him a while to get back out of it. But in the meantime, he, found himself in places he didn't need to be, nor should he have been. And it's unfortunate that he, started struggling with, with some chemicals and things like that. But here 10 years ago, he bit the bullet. He had 2 kids roaming around town, and he decided he was going to have his kids in his life, and they weren't allowed to be in his life as long as he was behaving that way. And he went and cleaned himself up, and he's been sober ever since, and he's just doing wonderful things.
That's fantastic. And
that's great.
And that's such a good role model for people that are currently going through challenges, that there's tons of examples of people that make mistakes, get caught up in something, get addicted to something, and then there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And Josh is a great example of how you can win in life, even though you've made mistakes, and we all make them. So I'm really happy to hear he's doing well. He's always such a good dude, I'm really happy to hear that. So then you adopted 4 kids.
Yes,
you didn't stop there.
Right. No. So Michelle and I decided she could not. She had to have some surgery when we first got together, and she was not able to have children because she had endometriosis really bad. Mm-hmm. And I hope she doesn't mind me sharing. Anyway, she couldn't have children, and so we started the process, and it took us took her probably a year and a half to get all the paperwork done, get it all written, get it all translated into Spanish, and get 18 gazillion copies, because we went through with this organization down in Portland, and we told them that we would adopt a child from out of the country, and that was kind of, I guess, their specialty, was getting, making that happen. And so after all of this and keeping in track, on February the 6th, 2002, we got a phone call, and the birth mother had just had him, and immediately passed him over. So now he's ours.
Wow.
And he's going to go to a foster home and be taken care of by one lady, and we pay the bill.
Sure.
So we chose to go the expensive way that time. Anyway, we got it all going, and everything was flowing, and every time we would think it, any day now, it would be this, you got to have this piece of paper signed, and it's on somebody's desk, and this and that. So we didn't, we got kind of flustered about it, but she got really frustrated. And one day I came home from the office, and I thought she was going to have a nervous breakdown. She was sitting on the stairs crying and sobbing, and they had told her one more time, this piece of paper is sitting on this guy's desk, and I can't. So I said, and her parents wanted to be part of, because this would have been their first grandchild, because there's just her and her sister. And they wanted to be a part of it, so I said, call your folks, and if they still want to go, you get plane reservations, we're going to Guatemala, and we're not coming back until he's with us.
Wow. That's
And
cool.
I
Cool
said, that's
story.
it. We're not playing the game anymore. This is what we're going to do. So we ended up, her folks came along with us. We got to Guatemala. We stayed in this little motel that was, if you look at that little stucco house behind you, it looks kind of like that, only it had a second floor and a balcony off in kind of the middle of the hotel. It was all gated, and it was next door to the U.S. Embassy. That's why we chose to stay at this place, and it was a little less expensive. And so we're thinking, ooh, how comfortable is this going to be? Well, it didn't matter, because we were there on a mission, and lo and behold, we got there, and no sooner got out and got our gear into the room and unsettled and everything, and we thought we were there for 3 or 4 days, and that we'd get to see him and be with them and share time with them, and that then they would make us go back and then come back and get him the next time or something. Well, we told them, we called the attorney who they were working through down there, and said we were in town and that we would like to see him. And about a half hour later, up they roll in kind of a beat up old white car.
Wow.
And
Here you go.
here comes this little baby, little brown baby, and they're holding them, and he's fussing, and handed him to us, and handed us a bag of clothes, and said, can we say goodbye to him? Goodbye. Got in that car and drove off.
That's it.
Wow, that was it.
And we thought, we were just, holy
You're gonna
smokes,
get
now what do we do?
Yeah, you're gonna be arrested for kidnapping or
Don't
something?
have any real supplies for
Paperwork.
him. We weren't planning on keeping him for,
Wow.
And then we started the process of getting this stupid piece of pink paper signed. Well, there were doctor's appointments that had never been followed through with. There were several other things that we had to go through and do. Finally, the morning of Thanksgiving, because they didn't acknowledge our Thanksgiving, the U.S. Embassy opened, and I'll come back to some other things in a second, but the U.S. Embassy opened 3 weeks now, we've been down there, and it opens for half of the day. We ran over there, we sat there until they finally got that piece of paper signed and handed it to us. And then we took off for the airport and ran as fast as we could go.
Good.
That's crazy. What a wild
So
3
we
weeks.
were trying to get home, and it was crazy. But,
And you got 2 other kids.
yep. And so you think about you think about how lucky, I mean, how we are here and how the freedoms we have.
Yeah.
On every street corner, it just so happened that there was a presidential election going on about that time. And on every street corner, there were military people with AK-47s standing there. Every bank you walked up to, there was somebody standing there with a shotgun or an AK-47 in their hand, ready to shoot you if you did anything you weren't supposed to do. The police went driving down the streets in these, like the old style Toyota pickups. And there'd be 3 or 4 guys in the back, and they all had AK-47s, and 2 guys up front in the front seat. And this was the police, and they're driving all over the place with these guns. Well, we were only there we came in on like a Wednesday or Thursday, so we had a couple of days, and we were laying there at night, and we knew that there was an election coming up over the weekend. We didn't think anything about it, but we were backed up to a military base. This place, now there only was the U.S. Embassy there, but there was also a military base. It was kind of a Guatemalan military, but yet there were some military people there too, U.S. Embassy. So we're laying there, and all of a sudden they started letting off fireworks, and we thought we were under attack. Boom, boom, boom. The bombs were going off, and the sky was lighting up, and people were yelling and screaming, and you know, all that stuff you'd expect. I mean, it would have been a great time to collect the sounds, you know, for a movie.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they did it all.
That's awesome.
You were just sure that
it was a celebration. You just didn't know it.
And that's it.
Your celebration for you.
We came out. The next morning
That's
finally
funny.
settled down. And the next morning we came out and said, "What the heck was that?"
So you guys were all
they
just
said,
like hiding.
The president was elected last night, and so was elected. And so they were celebrating.
Yeah.
Whoa!
They get after it.
That's quite a celebration.
Yeah, Guatemala is it's tough. You know, a lot of these countries are tough. You know, I have a funny story. You know my daughter Taylor, right?
Yeah.
So she was I think she was in grad school, and for audiology, she became a hearing doctor, right? Well, she's in Guatemala on a trip for school, taking care of kids, you know, and hearing in an orphanage. And all of a sudden, I get this text from her of a picture of a little girl, a little infant. She was couldn't walk, about 3 years old. And she's dead serious, and she goes, "Dad, I've decided to adopt this little girl." And I said, "You're like 20 years old in college." And she goes, "Well, I can't do it legally. So who do you know in the consulate that could change the immigration rules for Guatemala?" I'm like, what? Yeah, you know people. You just make a call. And I'm like, first of all, I don't. And secondly, you have a big heart.
Yeah.
And I love that you want to take care of every single one of those kids because they're all in need. And it was a very humbling experience for her to be able to come from a place that she grew up and then realize, wow, you know, she hadn't really done a lot of traveling to third world countries. And poverty is poverty.
Oh, boy.
And it's legit.
It is, absolutely.
So
you know, we went to that village, it's Antigua. Antigua. There's an Antigua and an Antigua. I'm not sure, but it's the one that's out there near Guatemala, about an hour and a half's drive. And we were driving up out of Guatemala, at the city, because that's where we were at, and looked back over the city, and all it was metal roofs, and little shanties, and that's where everybody lived. This was their housing. This was their, and you would come down the street. If you were in a car or if you were walking, whatever, little kids would come up, all their faces made like clowns, and they'd be juggling or they'd do something, but they were always somebody washing your windows, whatever they could do for quetzals, which is their dollar, I guess, or at least part of their coin, whatever it registers. And you would have, so they, you know, and you couldn't not give them something. I mean, they were so cute, and they were, especially the ones that were doing all of the juggling and the splits and the jumping back and forth, you know, tumbling, and doing that kind of stuff right in the middle of the intersection. The light's red and they're doing it. That, you know, and people wanting to turn, too bad, they're doing it. They're right there. And as soon as the light turns, then they all scatter and go over, and mom or dad are sitting at the corner there, and they've got their boxes of chiclets that they're selling, or their candy bars, or maybe a little box with ice and some water in it. You know, just
I haven't been to Guatemala, but I've been to a few other places and a lot in Mexico. And what I love about Mexico is that even though it's poverty, from our perspective, it's poverty stricken, I found that the vast majority of people are happy. And they're working hard, and they're okay, and kids are out playing with a stick and a rock, and you know, they don't necessarily have the materialism that we are accustomed to in America and kind of take for granted, I believe. But sometimes I think that just the simplicity of it and the creativity and you know, and doing things that I just found the people to be just really amazing. And I've been to Colombia, and I've been to a few other places that, you know, sometimes when you have less, you have more. And I just find that such an admirable trait that I think, my perspective is we're kind of just spoiled. I mean,
when I grew up and when you grew up, we made our fun.
Yeah, outside, yeah.
You know, we made our fun. Now, young people, excuse me, guys, but young people, more times than
She's
not,
an old soul.
are looking for you to give them something to make. You know, it's like, it's kind of like coming here on a vacation. They come here on a vacation, they expect you to have things in place and in order that are going to get them here to have fun, and they don't have to do anything but do it. You know, when we were growing up, when I was growing up, if you went on vacation, you brought your bat and your ball and mitt and anything, a football or whatever, frisbee, whatever you had, and you put your tent up or whatever, and then you played and you went fishing or whatever. And that was, so you created your own, you know, and it just doesn't happen anymore. We've become too accustomed to just being handed out, and it gets frustrating.
What's that old fable? Tough times make good men make, or tough, what is it?
Yeah,
like,
you said the first line right.
So
and
tough times make good men make easy times. And
tough men make good times. And then good times make weak men, and then it goes in a cycle.
Yeah, and it's so basically like every so often in, you know, history, go all the way back to the Roman Empire or something, where it gets too good, it gets too easy, we get too soft, and that creates difficult times again. And then it kind of has this rotation. And there's a lot, you know, if you look at throughout history, there's a lot of evidence to support that. When anybody gets a little too big for their britches, a little too entitled, a little too spoiled, monarchies, dictators, you know, whatever, bad things tend to happen, right? Yeah. And you kind of got to knock yourself. And I think humility comes in a lot of different ways in all of us. And it's just interesting. But I want to go back to your. So what was his name?
His name is Chase.
Chase.
And then we have Mackenzie. And Mackenzie was, we had agreed when she had this surgery and when we were planning getting married, she said, would you please, before that, we agreed, and she said, would you please let me have let us adopt at least one child. I want to be able to experience being a mother.
Okay.
No problem. I'm okay with that. And I'm 50 years old now, you know, at that time. And my mother thought I was crazy, but you know, it was important to her, and it was important to me. So we ended up with having him, and when we had the nursing home company, she and I spent great deals of time on the road, going to meetings, and we happened to be in Redmond, Oregon, and a food service meeting, talking about food costs and this and that with a vendor, and the phone rang, and they came and asked if they could interrupt us, and I said, well, Michelle, you go out and take care of it. I'll keep this going. Well, we got through that, and I don't know, she came back in and she sat down and she says, we need to talk. And I thought, oh no, now what? You know?
Those are not good words
And
usually.
so
We
we
need to
went
talk.
back, and I had this little office over in the corner, and we went in there, and she says, how do you feel about it? And she had been crying. And I could tell that, you know, so of course that even just exacerbated my feelings of something's wrong, you know. She says, how do you feel about adopting a little girl? I said, what? I don't know. I'm not so sure.
Yeah, what comes out of your mouth next is very
That's
important.
right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
You're making your fate at this
So
point.
I said, are you kidding? You know, we went through the whole, you're kidding, blah, blah. And she explained what was going on. And as it turned out, we were the only ones that had a completed packet. And this same agency had a young lady who was 20-some years old, but had the mental capacity of a 10-year or 12-year-old. And so the state was not going to let her keep the baby. And she had been, met a guy online and went to a library, and he picked her up, and you know, the old story. And so she ends up pregnant, and he didn't want anything to do with her or the baby, and so the family, immediate family, didn't want anything to do. And so we talked about it, and I said, well, let's sit down here and let's pray about it, let's think about it. And we did that, and we talked, and I started to cry, and I said, are you really serious? Is this really out there? She said, yeah. And I said, well, somebody has to take care of this child.
Yeah, wow.
She deserves something.
Mm-hmm.
So we agreed to do it. And we went from, this was on a Tuesday. She went on up home to get we had a condo on the west side, and it had our house over here, because sometimes when we were traveling, we'd get to Everett or to Renton and say, I'm not going any further, I'm pooped, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, so she was going up there to kind of straighten up the extra room, because that's where we had where Chase was in his nursery. So she's up there, she's getting things ready. I had to stop by a couple of the facilities, and I said, I'll just head on home, and went up 87 and drove, and it seemed like I drove all night long. And got into the house, sat down with a sandwich. She rings the phone, she says, are you home yet? I said, yeah. She says, you're probably eating a sandwich, aren't you? And I said, yeah. She says, well, you can either take it with you or throw it away, because you're on your way to Portland. Her water just broke.
Oh, wow.
This baby wasn't supposed to do for another 30 days, we thought.
Wow.
So we thought we had all kinds of time to get set up for her, and all of a sudden, here she was.
You should
So-
know with Chase, that's how you operate.
That's right.
Everything's expedited.
So I got in the car, drove as far as I could go to Vancouver, where we had some friends, and I dropped off Chase with them, and he, because I was so tired, agreed to drive me the rest of the way to Portland to the hospital. I got to the hospital just before she was starting to deliver.
Wow.
And so, and you know, I'm sitting there. Michelle is, of course, a nurse, and she's getting into this because she really, you know, she's helping. That's what
Yeah.
she's doing.
She's a nurse,
And
yeah.
so, and I got my back turned while they're doing all this, and you know, I can't bring myself to turn around and watch. She says, well, look at what's going on here. Turn around here and look at what's I had a hard time bringing myself to do that.
You weren't a nurse.
Yeah, that's right. And so
That's funny.
I just turned around and took a quick peek as the head was crowning, and I turned around and I started to cry.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, it was funny, and but the next day or afterwards, they had the baby in, you know, checking it all out and everything. And the next morning, they had gotten out a rocking chair, and we had, in the meantime, gotten a reservation at a hotel just down the street from the hospital, and made arrangements to get Chase to us the next day. And her parents were going to come up and what have you and see the baby. And so, but they had gotten a nice rocking chair all set up, and put it back in the corner of the nursery, and gave us 24 hours to just sit there and rock her and hold her and love her, and just to build the bond.
Yeah.
Because taking it and it was such a and of course then you begin to think about, as they start to grow up, you think, how are they going to, are his mom's issues going to become her issues? And lo and behold, she's a senior in college, carrying a 4.0 plus.
You've changed. I mean, let's think
Wow.
of the
She
lives
is
you've
just
changed.
Absolutely a genius. She's the manager
Wow.
of Shannon's museum up there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you
I've
met
met her,
up there,
yeah.
and
Good for her.
she is she's into taxidermy. She taught herself how to do taxidermy. She's done a couple of deer heads and stuff, and so she's she's one of these kids that just, if you tell her something and if she doesn't know the answer, within a short order she'll know the answer, because she just researches the heck out of it. And bless her heart, she'll kill me if she sees this. But she is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And
very personable too.
Very kind and loving, and I mean, she's got, we were concerned that she didn't go away to college because she's doing this SNHU thing. We were concerned because how was she going to socialize and make friends? Well, she's got friends in Australia, over in all these different countries, and they get together on Saturday night on the computer and play games.
Yeah, that's
so
how
they compete with together, and that's her network of friends.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of them that are from Washington and different places, but that's her approach to life. Get out there, find out who's out there, and find out what you have in common with them.
That's so cool.
And stuff. And she's just
it's funny, my son in the Marine Corps does the same thing with his buddies. The ex-Marines, they're all over now.
Yeah.
That's how they get together, and they'll be on Xbox or something and talking to each other and playing games, and it's good stress relief. Well, I'm curious, what would you say to somebody going through the adoption process that maybe is, first of all, what would you say to somebody thinking about it? I mean, obviously you're a selfless human being. And then what would you say to those people that are going through it and are frustrated by the time and the delays? And because I'm sure that happens, probably for good reason in a lot of cases. Sometimes maybe not so good reasons. But what would you say to those people going through it right now?
The best thing I could say is hang on. Put your arms around one another and just hang on, because the time will come. Unless you have some reason to believe that somebody's ripping you off for what it costs you. Because if you go into a private adoption, you have to pay not only the person who's caring for them until you get that, and that is if they're already born. If they haven't been born yet, you might be paying that mother, or whatever. But I would say, if you don't have faith, find it. And if you do, lean on it, and because that's what we did at times. And if you feel like there comes a time when you have to push the button, then get the tickets, get on the plane, and go find out what the hell's going on and why you're being jerked around like that.
Yeah, you got to kind of be your own advocate at that point.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Because the agencies themselves, as soon as they get a commitment from you and everybody's agreed this is your child and here's the money flowing, they're on to the next one. So
numbers game.
But I would also say that if there are people out there, and I've just learned this myself in the last few years, there are agencies that you can go to that are tied together with church organizations and stuff, where I actually saw an adoption. It probably took a week for two teenage, 11, 12-year-old kids. Their parents passed away, and they ended up in their aunt's lap, and she couldn't take care of them. And literally, by going through this agency, within a week, they were in their new home. found a wonderful Christian family. I mean, and
That's great.
doesn't mean it have to be Christian or anything. But in this case, it was. And there are agencies out there that you can go to, and a lot of people think, well, when you say that, you think of Catholic services. Well, they do great things, but they're not the only ones.
Right.
So don't be afraid to investigate what's out there. And if you know somebody who is particularly involved with their faith, however, maybe other than just going to church on Sunday, find out, talk to them, because they may know what the answer is. But that would be my recommendation to them. But hang on to one another. Don't let the frustration tear you apart, because then it'll never happen.
Yeah, well, that's
And
great
even
advice.
if it does,
Yeah.
then one of you is struggling because you're stuck with, whatever, if I could say it that way. But I know that when we struggled at times, that's what we did. We talked about it. I can remember in Josh's case, we actually spent time going through the Bible and deciding what his name would be,
That's awesome.
just to settle things down and to make sure, to kind of come together, because of the tension that was,
That's a big decision.
Yeah, it is.
It's a huge
It
decision.
is.
Well, it's funny, sometimes people will say, blood's important. I'm like, well, in my opinion, blood makes you a relative. Doesn't make you family.
Nope.
There's a lot of love that makes you a family.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I agree.
I think this has been a great podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I hope it helps people that are, 4 kids, selfless.
Yeah.
I mean, you just went for it, and you've helped so many countless employees, and it's just a tribute. It's been an honor and a privilege to sit here and talk to you today, my friend.
Well, I have 2 other daughters, but that's
You
a
do?
long story.
You're not done yet. Well, we might have to have you back.
I have,
we have to bring all your kids in and have a podcast.
No, I do have a kind of by happenstance, but there are 2 young ladies who live over on the coast who were involved in my life. I was kind of like a stepdad. When some things happened, they didn't want me out of their life, so they called me up and asked me to please continue to be their stepdad.
Good for you.
And be grandpa to their children. So, and I'm very lucky to bless.
What are their
that's
names?
beautiful.
Stephanie and Lisa.
All right. Well, so is there any more? We got any more?
No,
kids?
that's it. got
Dave's
12,
young, Dave.
12 grandchildren and 1 great grandchild.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a
And that's
blast.
just now. I'm sure it'll keep counting.
Yeah, well, you just
So,
keep spoiling
anyway.
those kids,
Yeah.
grandkids, and great grandkids.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, it's been a pleasure.
Hey, it's been great. I appreciate you taking time for me and asking the questions, and I'm happy to share that. And I know that if there are people out there who are thinking in that way, I can say to them, give us a call, because Michelle is plugged into a group that can help them.
There you go, Michelle and Dave Rogge
So,
from
Yeah.
Chelan.
all right.
All right, we're signing off one more
Thank
time.
you.
All
Small
right.
Towns Unscripted.
Thanks, guys. It's nice talking with you.
All right, Dave.
Thank you.
Take